The story of Bamori is a story long forgotten. In ancient times, Bamori was a kingdom that once fed everyone. Their soil was dark, soft, and fertile. The people shared food with neighboring villages and left bowls of food outside their homes for strangers to eat. In times of war, other kingdoms depended on Bamori for grain and roots, for Bamori's land never failed them. However, one season changed everything. The rain did not come. First, nobody worried. "It will come late," they said, as they always had. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The sun burned longer in the sky. The ground began to harden and split open like pots. Crops began to die before they could grow. Their rivers also began to dry up. Animals grew thin, and even cows stopped giving milk. Children cried at night, not from fear, but from hunger. Families began to measure food by handfuls instead of bowls. Arguments broke out in the markets. While some people hid what little grain they had left, others begged for crumbs. The smell of cooked food faded from the air, replaced by silence and worry. Bamori, the land that fed all, was now starving. The elders knew this was not an ordinary situation. They gathered and decided to seek answers from the spirits. First, they went to Narai, the river deity whose waters once flowed strong and clear. They poured libations and asked why the rivers were drying. Narai answered only with silence. Next, they climbed the hills to consult Kudoma, the spirit of wind and sky. They offered feathers and prayers, but Kudoma's winds passed without words. Finally, weak with hunger and fear, they traveled to the forest where Oshiri, the ancient watcher of hidden truths, was said to dwell. It was Oshiri who spoke. His voice was heavy and clear. He told them the truth. Far beyond Bamori stood the great shrine, a place older than kingdoms, where the balance of the world was kept. The shrine was guarded by a single chosen keeper, whose duty was to offer sacrifices and uphold the holy seed which gave rain to the lands. It was the guardian who kept seasons in order and fed the land. That guardian was now sick and close to death. With no one to chant the incantations or care for the holy seed, the rains had lost their path. Oshiri warned them that Bamori was not alone in its suffering. Other lands were already falling into chaos. Forests were burning without rain to stop the fires. Rivers in distant kingdoms had turned bitter and undrinkable. Crops failed across many lands. Hunger was pushing people into violence. Bands of thieves now roamed the roads. Kings grew desperate and cruel. If the great shrine fell, the world would fall into endless drought, war, and darkness. Oshiri then gave a command. 7 young men must be chosen, men strong in body and steady in spirit. They would be fortified with blessings and sent to find the great shrine before the guardian died. They must learn how to uphold the holy seed, or Bamori would perish. But Oshiri also warned them of danger. Bamori's men would not be the only ones searching for the great shrine. Other kingdoms were also in pain and looking for a solution at the shrine. He said that this also meant that evil rulers who wanted control and the ability to rule the world were looking for it too. Whoever ruled the shrine could bend rain, starve enemies, and force kingdoms to kneel. The 7 must walk carefully, for not every traveler was a friend.
Among the 7 chosen was Seko. Seko was broad-shouldered and tall, with hands rough from years of working the land. His back was strong from lifting sacks of grain and pulling stubborn roots from hard soil. He could till a field alone from dawn to sunset without rest. When famine came, he worked longer than most, trying to force life from dying ground. His skin was dark from sun and sweat, and his eyes were calm, the eyes of a man used to watching crops grow slowly. Seko was joined by his closest friend Bari, a hunter known for his sharp sight and steady aim. Bari could track animals across dry ground where others saw nothing. The other 5 were Tuma, Leko, Amari, Dano, and Kesai, who was the youngest. Together, they were given blessings, food for the journey, and the hopes of an entire kingdom. At dawn, they stepped beyond Bamori's borders, carrying not only weapons and supplies, but the future of their people. The journey to the great shrine took many weeks. The lands changed as the 7 walked farther from Bamori. They passed fields, plains, mountains, and even forests. At night, they slept lightly, taking turns to watch over their surroundings. Hunger followed them, but the hope of saving Bamori pushed them forward. The 7 men soon became close as they journeyed through. At last, they reached the place Oshiri had spoken of. The great shrine was not a palace like they had imagined. It was a cave half hidden by ancient trees and tall grass. The walls were carved with symbols no one had ever seen before. Between them grew a single tree, pale and strange. Sitting on a wooden chair and waiting for them was the guardian. He was old, maybe older than any man they had seen, but he was not weak. "You are not the first to arrive," he said calmly. Only then did Seko and the others notice the 2 strangers standing at the other end of the shrine. One was tall and richly dressed, his name was Kero. The other was Zun, lean and restless, his eyes always moving. They had arrived days earlier, the guardian explained, sent by their own rulers and elders. "The shrine does not belong to any kingdom," the guardian said. "It belongs to the forces that keep the balance of the world. I am old and dying. One of you will become the guardian of the great shrine. It is why the spirits have sent trouble across all the kingdoms. You all are here to be tested and proven worthy of being the next guardian of the great shrine." Seko and his team were surprised. They had come hoping to find an easy solution, but now they must be tested and chosen to guide the most powerful force protecting the world. The training began the next morning after more individuals arrived at the great shrine. They were all taken to a desert where the old guardian first tested them with patience. They were ordered to sit in a circle and a bowl of hot water was placed under the sun. They were told to wait until the water cooled on its own. No one was allowed to shade it, touch it, or move it. Those who acted too soon would fail. Hours passed and the heat burned. Lego and some other people in the circle shifted again and again. At last, Leko reached for the bowl to move it from the sun, thinking the guardian was not looking. The water spilled and he was disqualified. The guardian shook his head and Leko was sent away from the training ground. Later that night, he told his fellow travelers that he had no intention of becoming the next guardian of the great shrine. The second test was greed. The guardian led the remaining travelers into a wide storehouse carved deep into stone. Each of them were taken to different storehouses. The walls were lined with baskets of grain, dried meat, sharp weapons, polished gold rings, healing charms, and jars of clear water. The smell of food filled the air and stirred hunger that had been growing for days. The guardian told each man to take only what he truly needed to continue till the next day. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Tuma, whose strength had always made him confident, reached first. He lifted a heavy blade from the wall and tested its weight. His eyes moved to another weapon, then another. He told himself that danger lay ahead, and that extra strength was wisdom. He gathered 2 blades and a sack of grain. The moment his hands took more than he could carry, the objects in his hands became impossibly heavy. His arms sank toward the floor, and no matter how hard he tried, he could not lift the items again. Dropping to his knees, he released the items, but his strength did not return. His muscles felt empty, as if the power had been poured out of him. He was not hurt, but he could no longer carry even a small pack of grain. The guardian placed his hands on Tuma, and he was gently guided out of the shrine by unseen forces. He was alive but stripped of the strength he had trusted too much. Next was Kero, the man from the River Kingdom. He ignored the grains and water and went straight for the gold. He smiled as he filled his pouch, believing wealth would buy him power later. As he turned away, the gold in his pocket softened and spread like warm clay, sticking to his fingers and palms. It did not burn or cut, but it would not let go. The more he struggled, the tighter it held. When the guardian returned, Kero stood ashamed, hands bound by shining metal he could not release. With a quiet gesture, the guardian caused the gold to fade away, leaving Kero's hands weak and trembling. He was sent away, alive, but forever unable to hold riches without remembering that moment. Bari took dried food and a single knife. Seko took only water. He did not touch the grain or the weapons. He knew hunger could be endured. One by one, the men took the things they needed. When all the men stepped outside, only those who remained untouched by the storehouse were allowed to stay. Seko looked around to see that only 8 of the men were remaining. 5 of them were from Bamori. The storehouse doors sealed behind them, and the shrine grew silent once more. The next test was endurance. After a day's rest, the men were led into the open valley and left there without food or water. The ground reflected heat back into their faces. There were no trees, no rocks tall enough to give shade, no wind to cool the skin. They were told they must remain in the valley until the guardian returned. By the first night, cracks began to show. The men were thirsty and hungry. Dano tried to keep spirits high at first. He joked, spoke of home, spoke of food. But when his voice grew tired and his legs began to shake, his laughter faded. He walked in circles, muttering to himself. By dawn, his strength was gone. He dropped to his knees and pressed his face to the ground, begging the earth for mercy. When none came, he crawled toward the edge of the valley and did not look back. The guardian did not stop him. On the second day, Keisai could no longer bear it. He scraped at the ground with his hands, thinking that water must be hiding beneath the surface. He dug until his fingers were raw and his nails torn, but the soil stayed dry and lifeless. When night fell again and the stars came out, his courage finally broke. He wept openly and stumbled away into the dark, calling for his mother. He was allowed to go. One of the strangers followed soon after. He shouted curses at the shrine, at the guardian, at the sky itself. He claimed the test was cruel and meaningless. His anger gave him strength for a moment, but it did not last. He staggered away weakly. By the third day, all the men were silent. Amari, who had always been quiet and watchful, sat apart from the others. He had endured longer than most, but his eyes were dull now. He rose slowly, walked a few steps, then stopped. He looked back at Seko and Bari once, as if wanting to speak, but no words came. He bowed his head and left the valley with steady steps, accepting his failure without protest. Not long after, another unnamed traveler collapsed where he stood. He did not crawl or curse, he simply lay down and closed his eyes. When the guardian returned briefly at sunset, unseen hands lifted the man and carried him away from the valley, alive but defeated.
When the sun rose again, only 3 men still stood. Seko remained kneeling. His eyes stayed on the ground, his thoughts fixed on Bamori and the fields that waited for rain. Bari stood beside him, swaying slightly but refusing to fall. His jaw was tight, his pride burning as strongly as his thirst. And Zune, the lean stranger, still stood at the far edge of the valley. His body trembled, but his eyes were sharp and alert, as if he fed on endurance itself. When the guardian finally returned, he looked at the 3 who remained and nodded once. The other 5 had been judged and sent away. Only those who could endure emptiness without breaking were allowed to move forward. The remaining 3 were given food and water and were allowed to rest for a while. They were soon led before the guardian for the 4th test, which was truth. The guardian told them there would be no trial of strength, no waiting and no pain. Only one question would be asked, and it would be asked once. Why do you seek the holy seed? The silence that followed was heavy. Zune was the first to speak. He lifted his head and answered calmly. He said he sought the seed because power always gathers where hope is weak, and he wanted to stand where that power was strongest. He did not hide his words or soften them. The guardian studied him for a long moment, then nodded slightly, as if noting a fact rather than judging it. Seko stepped forward next, and he said he sought the holy seed so the rain could return, so children could eat again, and so Bamori would not become a land of bones and dust. Then Bari answered. He said he wanted hunger to end. He said no one should suffer the way they had suffered in the valley. His words sounded right. They were careful and clean, shaped like something the guardian had heard before. The guardian's eyes stayed on Bari longer than on the others. At last, the guardian turned away. The test is complete, he said. No one was told who had passed, and no one was told who had failed. That same night, while they slept at the shrine, another presence visited. Just as Oshiri had predicted, the kingdom of Urunal, who had always sought to rule the great shrine, visited. They did not send an army, but they sent one man. He was called Iram, a soft-spoken traveler who wore no weapon. His strength was his voice. He spoke slowly, kindly, and always sounded reasonable. Iram found Zun sitting alone outside the shrine, away from the others, staring at the ground, wondering what the future would hold, what it would be like to be the guardian of the holy seed. He sat beside Zun as if he belonged there and spoke softly. He did not speak of power at first. He spoke of hunger, of how villages were suffering due to the system of having only one guardian who decides the fate of the people. He said all guardians could fail, grow weak, or die, but rulers could build order and unity between every kingdom in the land. He told Zun to bring him the holy seed during the ritual of choosing the new guardian. When Zun refused, saying it was dangerous, Iram told him he was doing the noble task of correcting the old mistake of the past elders. He said the shrine was too powerful to be guarded in silence and that the world needed leaders who could command its gift, not simply protect it. "Help us guide the shrine," he said, "and no land will ever starve again." Zun did not agree, but he did not refuse. The words stayed with him, and doubt settled in his heart like dust that would not be brushed away. Bari saw everything that had happened from a hidden place. When Iram left, Bari followed him into the dark stone corridors beyond the shrine. There, he heard Iram speaking to the men he came with. Bari learned that Urunal did not want to share the shrine or use it for the good of people. They wanted to take and bind the holy seed to their own kings. Rain would fall only where they allowed it. Hunger and war would become a weapon. Bari did not warn Zun about what he heard. Instead, Bari chose himself. He knew that whoever brought relief to the world would have his name written in the scrolls of legends and history. "We have spent so much time already training and preparing for nothing," Bari said to himself. "I see the way the guardian looks at my friend. I might not even get chosen as the guardian. Then all my effort will go to waste." Satisfied by his own thoughts, Bari decided to save the world himself. Before morning, he went where only the guardian was meant to walk. He crossed the inner part of the cave and came to the part where the holy seed stood wrapped in a floating vessel. He spoke words he had overheard the guardian chant but did not fully understand its meaning. Then he touched the holy seed. The world reacted at once. Starting from the cave, the ground shook like there was an earthquake. Wind tore through the valley, screaming as it rushed past the shrine mouth. Clouds gathered too, and soon, a heavy rain started pouring in some lands while leaving others to burn. Rivers rose and drowned farms. Far away, houses sank into mud. Elsewhere, dust storms swallowed whole villages. The balance that held the world together had been torn open. Bari staggered back, fear filling his face. The light from the seed crawled over his skin, burning and cold at the same time. "I didn't mean this," he whispered. Hunger left his eyes, replaced by fear. "I only wanted to fix it." The guardian cried out and pressed both hands to the ground, chanting some incantations. His voice shook as he tried to hold the world together, pulling the broken pieces back into place. The effort bent his body low and blood ran from his nose. Still, the earthquake did not stop, nor did the rain. Then footsteps echoed. From the shadows of the shrine entrance, the spies of Urunal appeared. 3 men led by Iram and wrapped in dark cloth, their blades already drawn. They had followed the signs of chaos and come to claim the seed for themselves. Seko moved without thinking. He ran after the spies and soon Zun was beside him. Together they met the spies before they could reach the seed. Zun took a cut to the arm but did not fall. Seko drove one man back into a pillar, crushing his chest. Another dove to push the guardian who was still trying to hold the world together, but Zun caught him and dragged him down, ending the fight in the dust. Behind them, Bari collapsed to his knees, shaking. The guardian's chant faltered. His strength was fading. "Seko?" the guardian gasped, barely able to stand. "Come now." Seko ran to him. The guardian grabbed his hands with trembling fingers. You must take my place, just for this moment. Say the words as I say them and move as I move. Do not force the seed. Guide it." Seko nodded, fear tight in his chest. Together they stood before the holy seed. The guardian whispered the words. Seko repeated them, steady and clear. He placed his hands where the guardian showed him. He felt the power inside him like a wild animal, and he remembered the tests they were put through. Patience, endurance, choosing others over himself. While he was trying to follow the lead of the old guardian, one of the spies stood up and made to slash Seko with a sword. Bari screamed and stood up to defend his friend. "Now," the guardian said to Seko, "ground it." Seko pressed his feet into the stone and spoke the final words. The shaking slowed, the wind stopped, and the rain softened into tiny drops. The light around the seed dimmed, warm and calm once more. The last spy tried to rise behind them, but Bari struck him down before he could take another breath. He lay still, breathing heavily, his eyes on his best friend. The guardian sank to the floor, exhausted, but smiling. He looked at the three men and nodded. Bari lowered his eye in shame and knelt before the guardian on the floor. "The world stands because you all did not take or destroy. You may rise, son," he said. That day, the holy seed accepted Seko. The storms ended. The rains returned as they should, and the world was normal again. Even though the three had held the world together at the time, Bari's name was never spoken again. Zune returned home humbled by the experience he had gathered. The old guardian died shortly after passing his powers to Seko, who was the new guardian of the great shrine and protector of the holy seed. And so the story was passed down in low voices by the people who lived during the ancient times of magic and world unity. Many years later, the story of Seko is retold as the legend of Shazam, with many details changed.